I wanted to first talk about this big story. Obviously, the Supreme Court basically helping Donald Trump by pausing a federal judge's decision that would have returned a man, Abrego Garcia, back to the United States. He is being held. He's one of the men being held in Sicot in El Salvador. And he was supposed to be returned by midnight last night, according to federal judge Paula Zinnes of Maryland. Kilmar is his first name. And the Supreme Court was like, I'm going to help you out here. I'm going to help you out. And again, he was ordered to return by 11:59 on Monday. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals declined the government's appeal to lift that order. The lead opinion described it as unconscionable, the government's position that it couldn't be required to remedy its erroneous decision to send Abrego Garcia to the Salvadoran prison. That's, again, important to know because they admitted, ICE was like, oh, oops, we sent him to El Salvador in error. They said erroneously. But then John Roberts signed the order saying that, yes, Kilmar will remain for now and in the, again, terrorism confinement center known by its Spanish acronym SICOT while the High Court considers the case. What can you explain? Like, what is his rationale? Is the Supreme Court saying, yeah, the U.S. can't do anything about it, kind of similar to what the administration has been saying, like, once we disappear them, you can't reappear them?
They haven't said that yet, at least, which is good. But they are saying, while we consider this, we're putting a hold on that deadline. It's a little crazy making, though. This is one of many cases where you feel like you can't talk about it without sounding like a lunatic or like you're panicking, because the reality is catastrophic, right? Like, just describing the facts of what is happening, where people are being sent, how much legal procedure they're getting before, during, and after they're sent there is just horrific. It's just horrific. So
I wanted to dig into those details a little bit in a little bit. But we really are in this constitutional crisis because the very fact that they are there is illegal based on, another federal judge, Judge Boasberg's ruling that said the Alien Enemies Act cannot be implemented. We have this case. There's a lawsuit. These planes need to be turned around and or shouldn't have left in the first place. And that was defied. So, I mean, I guess just bring us up to speed.
So the Boasberg case was interesting because basically five individuals said, they had a sense that the Alien Enemies Act, which is this very old statute, it's from, the founding essentially, would be used in this way. So they filed something before the announcement was even made, but it was just, their 5 individual cases. After the judge had sort of said you can't deport them, they also moved to create what's called, like a class action, basically saying you shouldn't be able to deport similarly situated people. And there was a hearing scheduled, and the morning that the judge scheduled the hearing, the Trump administration they hustled a bunch of people onto planes and sent them off just hours before the hearing, understanding, well, in Boasberg's words, the only inference is that, like, you were just trying to beat the deadline. Like, you knew this hearing, I might certify a class and prevent you from sending anyone. And so you try to get them out of here before then, which is what happened. So the 5 original plaintiffs, they didn't end up going to El Salvador, but a lot of other people did.
And 238 of them, to be exact. And according to 60 Minutes, which did an entire sort of expose on this, 75% of the Venezuelans who were deported, who are now in prison, 179 of them, they could not find any criminal records for. So the majority have no criminal records. And speaking of that hearing, I mean, Boasberg I think I just read suspended that hearing ultimately because there was going to be sort of a revisiting of this Alien Enemies Act and what had gone down, but because of the Supreme Court's ruling that it was okay to disappear somebody, even though Kilmar was by a judge, he had asylum claims that were being processed and he should not have been removed, let alone erroneously to El Salvador. That's all kind of off. So it's wild to see. Obviously, it's not surprising because it's the Supreme Court, but it was wild to be like, oh, that's your boss. Like that court's your boss court, and you are you're Judge Boasberg, and so of course you're gonna not have that hearing you were supposed to have because you're deferring to this higher court.
Yeah, it's a real problem, and something that just happened last night is. So the Supreme Court basically said, look, these claims need to be handled a certain way by what's called habeas corpus, via a habeas corpus petition, which means rather than this class action cases where we could decide, for everyone in a very sort of efficient manner, everybody has to bring these claims individually, which is an insane requirement, especially because in the immigration context, you don't even have the right to an attorney. You have a statutory right to pay for an attorney, but you don't get Miranda rights. You don't get an attorney assigned. It's more like the appearance of legal protections than the substance of legal protections is what's being prescribed here. But also the thing about habeas corpus is originally it was about indefinite detention, and you can't, somebody saying you can't hold me, you're holding me, you're detaining me illegally. Well, the jurisdiction for that is wherever you're being held, and the government knows that, and so they have been shuffling people to Louisiana and Texas extremely quickly because the courts there are very friendly. Right, the district courts and the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals are even more right-wing than the Supreme Court. And so if everything is being heard in the Fifth Circuit, we can expect it to be extremely, extremely reactionary and very few petitions being granted. Yeah.
And even with the habeas corpus, is it true that, that habeas corpus under holding people in Guantanamo, which is a base run by the United States, that the fact that they are being held in El Salvador circumvents this need or the habeas corpus because it's in a whole other country.
Right. So that's one of the things that's still to be figured out, which is they essentially said in a very brief opinion that there needs to be some judicial review. And the question is at what point in the process? And so I would assume it would look something like you're snatched off the street, you are put into a bus, taken to the airport, put on a plane, and end up in a detention center in Louisiana. Then you're told you have an opportunity to file a habeas corpus petition. For some indefinite period of time, who knows? And then maybe you get sent off to Seacoast, or maybe not. Who knows? But I mean, I wouldn't say I'm encouraged that we're going to get much substantive, fulsome review here. And even if we did, the federal district courts, all the federal district courts throughout the 50 states handle about 300 cases a year. Trump, 300,000 cases a year. Trump said he wants to deport 20 million people, right? Maybe not all of them will be going to Seacoast, but, if they try to deport millions of people, and there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of habeas petitions, that would triple, quadruple, quintuple the caseload, which would mean they would just remain in indefinite detention, I guess.
Right. I mean, and ICE is looking to expand detention centers and all this, but you're saying, that it's just impossible. I mean, immigration court is already backed up, but the idea that you'd have to file these habeas petitions, in federal court would be, it's impossible.
Yeah, the next obvious step is, well, we should just build deport centers here, right?
Right.
Which that is the obvious next step, which they have allocated a lot of money towards. So, yeah, I mean, it's all roads seem to lead to concentration camps and terrible conditions. I do want to mention, like, I think it's worth saying, I know this has been reported. I don't know if you've discussed it on your show or how widely it's been reported, but like El Salvador has been in a state of emergency for 3 years. It's led to the suspension of a lot of civil rights there. There hasn't been a lot of reporting on what's going on in Seacoat in particular, but that's because they say that's the prison for the worst of the worst. They say that's the prison where once you go in, you will never leave.
Yep.
And to date, nobody has left. So there's no first person accounts of what it was like in there. But other prisons, the stories are people getting beaten for hours, people being shoved into barrels full of ice water for hours, head underwater, thinking they were going to drown, being tortured. The conditions we do know of there, 80 people to a cell. Their bunks are steel, no pillows, no cots, no sheets.
They're not allowed to go outside. When we know that, we know they're not allowed to receive visitors. I'd actually just, let's play a little bit of this, because, one of the other people, in addition to Kilmar, is a man named Andres, and Andres is Venezuelan. He is the gay hairdresser. He, here he is, looking fabulous with a crown, with some makeup brushes. Clearly he's an artist, but you see his arm has tattoos. And 60 Minutes interviewed one of the photographers, or the photographer who took photos of the 238 men who were deported to El Salvador. And this is a little bit of Andres and what the photographer observed.
One of the Venezuelans who caught Holsinger's attention was this man, who 60 Minutes has now identified as Andre Hernandez Romero. Andre's lawyer told us he is a 31-year-old gay man and makeup artist with no criminal record in the United States or Venezuela.
So this is a young man that I had followed from the bus who was exclaiming that he was soy gay and saying that he was innocent. And he was, being slapped every time he would speak up, but he just, like, he couldn't help himself. Then he started praying and calling out, literally crying for his mother. His crying out for his mother really, touched me.
Yeah, I mean, so there you have it, is crying out for his mother, being slapped. They couldn't look, other places. They had to look forward. He photographs, someone's head being turned forcibly. I mean, it's truly inhuman, and it's disgusting and cruel. And just today, Caroline Leavitt, press secretary, said, "Oh, we're looking into how to do this to citizens as well."
Right.
So that's not off the table. And we shouldn't be surprised. And everyone, and she was sort of very catty and cunty about it. But, this is what we talk about when it's like a constitutional crisis of they defied a court order. Now the highest court in the land, which is loaded with zealots and Christian nationalists, except for one. I mean, the right apparently hates Amy Coney Barrett because she's not on board with all of this. Maybe you can speak to some of that. I don't know what the latest is.
She's still so new to the court. It's hard to get a handle on her ideology.
Sure.
She did sign on to some of the worst opinions, though, right? Like the Roe v. Wade decision, the presidential immunity decision. So I don't want to give her too much credit, but she has balked at some of the more extreme requests from the Trump administration. She didn't sign on to this, but that's sort of the reality also of having a 6-3 court, is you can lose a justice here and there. And that's kind of the way these things work is, now that they have a 6-3 court, they bring more extreme claims, right? Like conservative lawyers are more aggressive, conservative, legal organizations and this administration, they feel emboldened to be more aggressive because, hey, even if we turn off Amy Coney Barrett here or John Roberts there, we still have the other 5, right?
The odds so you have to in our favor. Yeah.
You have to really extend yourself to lose 2 justices, not just one. So, if it ever became a 7-2 court, they would go even further because they would have even more margin for error. That's sort of the way it all works. And the worst decisions usually are 5-4. And I think last night's is a perfect example of that, right? Like, this is stuff that is out of a dystopic novel, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is stuff that it's out of your history books about the Holocaust, right?
Yeah.
It's
Or
what the
American
start of-
history about,
Yeah.
the internment of Japanese people, which again, all of
Absolutely.
these laws were lying around. And the fact that we haven't amended them, changed them, or made it impossible to employ them. I mean, to your point about El Salvador, if it's been in the state of emergency, it's also a lesson. And Trump and the Trump administration, Marco Rubio, loves El Salvador and loves Nayib Bukele, in part because they're using emergency powers. And that's what Trump is doing with the tariffs. And he's also doing that now with, deportation, with the rescinding of student visas. It is, we're in a war. It doesn't matter against who, just for speech. Or just for having tattoos. And so ipso facto, I can do whatever the hell I want. Let me ask you about birthright citizenship, because on January 20th, Trump ordered this executive order and it's being litigated. There are lawsuits before them, but it is wild to me that, like, first of all, that EOs are just like, okay, well, I guess we're doing this now, and like, it's like, that's not how anything works. And the Justice Department knows that's not how anything works. And these courts know that that's not, but birthright citizenship, do you think that's a bridge too far for the Supreme Court, or do you think it will be before them?
It'll definitely be before them. So it's, their executive order has been enjoined by many district court judges. It's been appealed to 3 different circuit courts of appeal, the 1st, the 4th, and the 9th circuits. All 3 have maintained the injunction. So, like, the administration's been put on hold, and they took that to the Supreme Court, and they're asking the Supreme Court to lift these injunctions. That was last month. This is, on the emergency docket, so it's a very limited petition. But I suspect we are going to see a lot more action on that there. I do think you don't want to make predictions with the Supreme Court, but with this court in particular, I do think it might be a bridge too far for them. This is something that is 140 years of established practice, history, the clearest reading of the Constitution, precedent, Supreme Court precedent directly on point, undisturbed for over a century. Like, there's no getting around that this would be revolutionary in a very serious way and totally reconceptualize what it means to have rights in this country. Because I don't have anything that proves I'm a citizen. Nobody does, because what you have is your birth certificate, which shows that you were born here. Other than that, that's what it is. Like, there's no centralized who is and isn't a citizen authority. This stuff is all handled by the states. And even
if that is not legitimate, which, by the way, like, the idea, there's also people who are naturalized citizens, or people who were from countries or in conditions where they never got a birth certificate because of those conditions, right? But now they are citizens. I mean, but like, even obviously a birth certificate is not going to be good enough, or it's going to have an asterisk, and you're just... That's exactly my point. That's like, my birth certificate doesn't say U.S. citizen on it. It just says I was born in Fort Lauderdale, right? Totally. And that's the only people who have, like, written documentation of their citizenship are naturalized citizens, right? That's it. Totally.
So
it doesn't say you were born to immigrants.
Right. Yeah. So the whole thing is an effort to consolidate in the executive branch, the creation of a caste system of who gets the privileges and immunities of citizenship and who does not. And once you have a caste system, a formal caste system like that, it's inevitable, who is going to find their citizenship in question? And it will be, people of obvious ethnic or foreign descent, political dissidents, right? Like we know how this story goes. We've seen it in other countries all the time. We've seen it in this country in efforts to reduce the citizenship status of African Americans after the Civil War, right? In the Jim Crow South. Like there's precedent here and abroad. We know exactly what this is.
What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do